Did you know Taylor Swift wrote the song We Are Never Getting Back Together about the Korean Peninsula? Just kidding. That's 100% false, but part of the question we're going to answer today. All right, learning target today. I can compare and contrast North and South Korea. Your check for success, you're going to use the Go formative to identify 4 differences and 2 similarities between North and South Korea and predict if they will ever get back together. Today's date is May 13th. Here's everything you've done so far this week. Today, just focus on the Korean comparison. All right, here's how today's going to work. You're going to start by taking a short set of notes. You're going to use those notes for the Go formative. Notes will not be graded, Go formative will be. So go ahead and take time to set up your notes. Start by writing the subject and learning target at the top. Create a heading. Make sure you indent that first bullet point. Remember, these notes are not going to be graded, so abbreviate as much as you would like. Write down the underlined items and start a new bullet point for each color. And that'll make sense in a sec. So for example, I have the class at the top, learning target. I can compare and contrast North and South Korea. I abbreviated North with an N and South with an S. Feel free to do the same. I have the date on there just in case. For my headings, I usually put an arrow in the margins, so that way they stick out even more. You can do the same or something different, whatever makes sense to you. And indent your first bullet point so it looks something like this. If you need more time to write this down, go ahead and put your video on pause. Okay. Before the Korean War, North and South Korea were actually one united country. The Korean War was between North and South Korea during the Cold War. This was kind of like a war within a war, and we call that a proxy war. Here's how it started. After World War II, the Soviet Union and United States, they worked together during World War II, liberated Korea from Japan. And they were like, okay, Korea, now that you're a free independent country, what kind of government do you want? The North was like, communist. The South was like, democracy. And the Soviet Union and United States were like, what? So they decided to split the country in half while they figured it out. And they split it along the 38th parallel, which is a line of latitude. Because the North wanted communism, the Soviet Union allied with the North. Because the South did not want communism, the United States allied with the South. Both countries claimed to be the legitimate government of Korea. Go ahead and put this video on pause if you need more time to write down your information. So while they were trying to figure it out, North Korea's like, I'm sick of waiting, and they invaded South Korea. And after a lot of fruitless fighting and frustration, they called an armistice in 1953 that ended the war. This gift kind of shows what the fighting was like in the Korean War. One day, North Korea would gain a lot of territory, and then the next day they would lose it. And then the next day, South Korea would gain a lot of territory, and then the next day, South Korea would lose it. Here's that 38th parallel right here. What ended up happening is they were split along the DMZ, which would be close to the 38th parallel, but not quite. The DMZ is the demilitarized zone, and it's a neutral area separating North and South Korea. You are not allowed to go into the DMZ unless you have special permission, which is rarely granted by North Korea and South Korea. It's heavily guarded, so if anybody tries to cross, like, you're going to be shot at. I think that's pretty much it. That's all you really need to say about that. You'll notice that the coastline, there's coastline along Korea, and there's also like little islands off the coast of Korea. The coastline and those islands are also heavily guarded. Okay, the physical geography, new heading, so make sure you write that down in your notes, the new heading. Both countries are very mountainous, making it super difficult to farm. So they look a lot like this. On top of that, North Korea has a colder and wetter climate, which means their growing season is even shorter. If you need more time to write this down, put your video on pause. Okay. This is all going to be one bullet point, the stuff that is underlined in blue. That's what you're going to write down for the next bullet point. South Korea, remember, they have a lot of mountains, so it's hard to farm. They also have limited mineral resources. So here's how they make money. Industrial production. They're making things. So they import raw materials from other countries, and then they use them to make finished products like electronics, like Samsung products, cars like Hyundai. North Korea, on the other hand, remember they can't farm, but they have a lot of mineral resources, so they make money off coal, lead, and iron. Both of these countries are subject to typhoons and hurricanes, which makes sense because they're along the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean. If you need more time to write this down, go ahead and put your video on pause. All right, their governments are almost completely opposite. South Korea has a democracy, while North Korea is communist. South Korea, their government's going to sound a little bit familiar with some differences with the United States. They have a president elected by the people. That president serves 5 years. It's not 4 years, but 5 years. And there's no additional terms. Like you can't get reelected as the president of South Korea. They also have a prime minister. His job is to assist the president. North Korea is communist, which means their government controls almost all aspects of life, like the job you have, how many hours you work, and where you live. Their current leader is Kim Jong-un. He was not elected by the people. He got that job because his dad was the leader before him, and his dad was the leader before him. Kim Jong-un has kept North Korea focused on military strength and building up nuclear weapons. You guys might remember a few summers ago when President Donald Trump was calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man, and we came like super duper close to nuclear war with North Korea. Scary times. All right, the economies. South Korea trades openly with countries like the United States and Japan. Remember, they don't have a whole lot of mineral resources. Their land isn't good for farming, so they depend on making things to make money. Their major industries include shipbuilding, automobiles, and electronics. North Korea, on the other hand, remember they have a lot of minerals, but they have a command economy, which means it's controlled by the government. They also have a policy of isolation, which means they're trying to make and produce everything that the people within their country need by themselves. They don't trade a whole lot with outside countries. The country that they do trade a lot with is China, which makes sense because they're right next door. North Korea is focused on producing military equipment. So instead of producing agriculture, which is what instead of focusing on farming, which is what their country really needs, they're producing military equipment. This has resulted in extreme food shortages, as you can kind of see from this really, really sad picture right here. This is some satellite imagery of East Asia at night. You can tell where Japan is because it's all lit up. You can tell where South Korea is because it's all lit up, but you can barely even see North Korea. Not only do they face a lot of extreme food shortages, but they have shortages in power, electricity, heat, and other things. If you need more time to write this down, put the video on pause. Okay, South Korean culture. Some of you guys will really enjoy this. In the past, most Koreans were farmers, but they kind of shifted away from agriculture and more to producing things. And now most people live in cities. This is their capital city, Seoul. You can tell, really, really big, busy city. Christianity became popular after the Korean War. A third of the people that live in South Korea are Christian. Another third are Buddhist. Video games in South Korea have been growing in popularity, and they're famous for producing esports athletes, like people who play video games professionally. Here is a famous South Korean e-athlete. He goes by the name Faker, and he's a professional League of Legends esports athlete. With the rise in popularity of video games has also come a rise in concern over video game addiction. So South Korea has implemented a Cinderella law, also known as the shutdown law. What this law does is it prevents anyone under the age of 16 from playing online video games from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. I'm going to give you gamers like 20 seconds to shout at your screen and tell me like all the ways you can go around this law. All right. Korean pop stars, also known as K-pop, have expanded to a global level. BTS is a very well-known K-pop group. If you need more time to write this down, go ahead and put your video on pause. All right, last one. As you can tell, there's not a whole lot of pictures on the slide, and this is because information about daily life in North Korea is very hard to come by. Remember, North Korea is very isolated. You can't just go to North Korea. You need special permission to be in that country or leave that country. So we don't really know a whole lot about that country. North Korean government controls access to outside information. So there's no internet. There's very few cell phones. The people who do have cell phones are extremely restricted on the things that they can do on those cell phones. All newspapers are controlled by the government, and the only thing that's really printed is how great their leader is and how great the country is. So people in North Korea are almost brainwashed to believe that they're living in a fantastic country in with a leader who is the best thing ever. Smugglers illegally bring in South Korean media, music, and movies using USB sticks. If a North Korean is caught with outside media, they can be imprisoned or killed by the government. So if they're caught with anything that was not made and approved by the North Korean government, they're in big trouble. North Korea is known for being one of the poorest countries in the world, and most people are living in poverty. Many people don't have regular access to power, heat, clean water, or even food. If you need more time to write this down, go ahead and put your video on pause. All right. So that's it for the notes. Here's how you access today's assignment. Go to Schoology, click on the Korea Comparison Go Formative assignment. Remember, with Go Formative, you log in using your school email address. If you are using a different email address or if it's just not working, feel free to use this code HPR37A, and that code will be on that Korean comparison link on Schoology. Then you're going to use your notes to complete the Go Formative. If these notes have sparked your interest in North Korea, you can go ahead and check out the documentary on Schoology. The Go Formative is your assignment today. The documentary is not required. All right, so here's all you have to finish today, Korea comparison assignment. If you have questions, be sure to message or email your teacher, or if you'd rather, you can text 304-853-0426. Good luck, guys.